They come with a shadow longer than night itself. Their armour is blacker than pitch, and symbols engraved on the metal glow with an inner fire, saturated with the warp itself. No one knows when they will appear on the horizon, and the worlds that encounter them only remember the fear before the last spark of resistance is extinguished. Chaos Knights are not merely war machines. They are living fortresses, subjugated to those forces whose names have been erased from the annals. Their pilots once served the Emperor, were loyal to him and the legions that protected humanity. Now their allegiance belongs to chaos, and through these towering walkers its will manifests, irreversible and relentless. Every step they take tears the earth apart, demolishes fortress walls, and leaves a trail of destruction that remains on planets for centuries. When a Chaos Knight enters the battlefield, the ground trembles, and the air fills with the rumble of its mechanical heart, as if the very fabric of reality quakes at their presence. They do not follow the light, nor do they seek life. Their movement is dictated by laws and rituals where death and fear are tools of power. Even the most battle-hardened legions tremble before these machines. Fighting them is not a battle, but a test of human endurance to its utmost limits. Their appearance changes everything. Cities thought impregnable, commanders' chambers, trenches, and citadels. All these are temporary obstacles for their destructive might. Every planetary defense force experiences a fear that chronicles attempt to silence. Uprisings and rebellions, for long suppressed by the Imperium, turn into catastrophes when Chaos Knights join the fray. For them, war is the meaning of existence. Mercy holds no value here. Every strike is proof of chaos dominion over matter and mind. The sky over worlds unfortunate enough to fall under their onslaught becomes heavy, and their presence is felt even from afar. The atmosphere seems to thicken, and garrison crews subconsciously slow their breathing, sensing something beyond explanation. Every decision made at this moment feels like a wager on the brink of an abyss, where even a small mistake can turn into a disaster. The force that guides them does not depend on human plans. It shapes events, rewrites outcomes, and makes those who still hope for order doubt the very nature of the Imperium. With each vast step, these titans draw closer to their prey, shaking the cracked earth. When enemies are covered by long shadows and acrid clouds of plasma gases burst from exhaust ports resembling grotesque maws, those condemned by the knights to death begin to understand that their final hour has come, and open fire on the colossal machines, only to see their hopes for survival evaporate. Flickering ion shields absorb any shots. Energy discharges dissipate, and projectiles explode as they approach the target. The undaunted knights continue their dreadful advance, their numerous war systems grinding into active mode, and then the mechanical giants unleash all their might upon their victims with a deafening roar. Massive guns release scorching beams that explode like supernova, incinerating soldiers and leaving only bubbling pools of metal from the tanks. Monstrous large-caliber cannons spew a barrage of explosive shells capable of breaching the walls of a reinforced concrete bunker. Guided and unguided missiles soar through the sky toward the most dangerous foes. Those who are not blown to pieces in the first volley face a grim death from blinding laser discharges or disintegrating plasma clusters. While the survivors desperately attempt to halt the enemy's advance, the knights rain volleys of monolithic shells on their positions, piercing through flesh and armour, leaving behind only riddled corpses and a thick crimson mist at the heart of resistance. Those who dare not flee but stand in the steel giant's path meet point-blank shots, torrents of burning promethium, or ignominious death beneath heavy feet. The knights looming over their enemies swing colossal chain swords, slicing through the air. Jagged adamantium teeth with disdainful ease cleave open the hulls of tanks and tear their hapless crew to shreds. Others exploit combat gauntlets, crushing any enemy machinery within reach or scattering it aside. Each Knight of Chaos is a desecrated relic of humanity's past, a crooked reflection of the Imperial Knight, born from sorcery, sinister rituals, and a diabolical reconstruction. The first knight armors were built according to standard templates during the Dark Age of technology, and many survived the following millennia of wars. For countless generations, these colossi have been piloted by noble representatives of the aristocracy, strong of body, mind, and spirit, enough to endure the ritual of awakening and become part of the machine, thereby forging a close bond with it. But in the case of fallen houses, such traditions are distorted by the madness of once valiant warriors, black magic, and the entities of the warp. Although the traitorous knights initially appear unchanged, an irreversible process of decay occurs within. Over years and centuries, the essence of chaos seeps into the war machine, eroding its spirit and altering its appearance. Thus, the armor and their knights, once resplendent warriors of honor, transform into a symbiotic beast filled with unquenchable rage and primal hatred. The pilot commands the knight's armor or the knight by connecting to a mysterious device built into the cabin, the throne mechanicum in larger models, or the helm mechanicum in smaller ones. Neural interfaces and cerebral cables provide connection to the human's nerve nodes, allowing direct interaction with the machine's systems. As a result, the flow of malicious thoughts sets the motors and control mechanisms in motion, while sensory information and readings from the multidimensional auspex are fed directly into the brain. Inside each throne mechanicum dwell the echoes of its former masters, howling tech ghosts whose torment becomes unbearable as the knight they are associated with becomes increasingly distorted. Only the most indomitable of the fallen nobles can interact with the throne without words, moving the machine to action by sheer willpower alone. Those who connect to the helm mechanicum are similarly disfigured by the energy of chaos consuming their armor. Moreover, these devices bend the pilot's mind and soul to submit to their overlord knights. Since the times of the heresy, thousands of nobles and even entire households have embraced chaos, with each betrayal inflicting significant damage on the Imperium's defences. For the knights not only hold essential roles in the armies of humanity, but are also considered among the most steadfastly loyal servants of the Emperor. The mere suggestion that any of them might renounce their vows and turn against the Imperium borders on blasphemy. There are rumours that the Departamento Munitorum has issued orders to execute officers unwilling to acknowledge their reports of battles against noble renegades. However, the horrifying reality is that more and more Chaos Knights, craving anarchy and slaughter, are encroaching upon the Emperor's domains. The fallen aristocrats have varied reasons for launching bloody campaigns. Some seek to conquer lands in the name of the sinister deities they now worship. Others have sworn allegiance to the Dark Mechanicum, the renegade Astartes, or powerful otherworldly entities responding only to their calls to war. Some, driven by mad ideas and nightmarish visions, embark on a journey intending to tear the very fabric of reality and turn the galaxy into an unimaginable inferno. During planetary battles, These engines of destruction can unhesitatingly traverse vast distances through toxic or radiation-contaminated environments to reach their enemies. When war spans multiple worlds, the treacherous nobles head to the front line aboard cursed ships and heavy cargo barges. There have even been instances where, in the fiercest battles, these mechanical monstrosities emerged from gaping breaches in the tormented reality. A single Chaos Knight possesses the firepower and resilience befitting a small army. Those who have turned away from their knightly house, or even slain its other members, are classified by the Ordo Hereticus as Dreadblades. Usually operating as lone wolves or mercenaries, they support heretic leaders in exchange for relics, secret knowledge, or feudal domains, planets where they can engage in all manner of villainy. Often, entire hordes follow Dreadblades into battle. Chaos Space Marines, who believe in the destructive potential of the knights, and swarms of cultists, who worship them as embodiments of the will of the dark gods. There are instances where Dreadblades gather in groups, channeling all their inexhaustible rage towards accomplishing a single vile objective. The nightmares capable of turning a knight into a Dreadblade are as varied as the very essence of chaos itself. Some are lured onto the path of damnation through illusions and deceit, while others become wandering warriors due to growing madness. There are also knights who have chosen a solitary and brutal existence of their own volition to seek vengeance and fulfill an oath of murder. A warrior who has turned away from the Imperium and his family becomes an exile forever. Yet this only makes him more dangerous. Nothing hinders a Dreadblade, free from the bonds of loyalty and service, from pursuing his own goals, travelling from one theatre of war to another, or tracking across the galaxy anyone who has offended his distorted sense of honour. Many Dreadblades originate from houses still loyal to the Imperium. During the Heresy, when the rest of their kin sided with the Loyalists, certain knights felt compelled to remain faithful to the rebels. The schisms that flared across the galaxy are countless, and though many voices of the rebellious knights have been silenced forever by titanic duels, other unruly nobles vanished among the stars, only to reappear later in the armies of the Warmaster. Some who would eventually become Dreadblades were captured in battle when their allies were annihilated, and their armour damaged so severely that they could no longer fight. Such individuals faced a grim fate. Lengthy, sorcerous tortures and infernal rituals gradually fractured their minds and souls until all notions of loyalty and honour vanished, replaced by the pernicious ideals of their captors and a feverish thirst for carnage. Moreover, there are Dreadblades who, over lengthy and bloody campaigns, lost all ability to discern what is righteous and what is not. At a certain point, they became so mired in killing that their sole concept of honour became associated with the powerful swing of a blade or the devastating salvo of their battle cannon. Often they are unaware of their fall and fail to notice the senseless atrocities they commit. However, far more terrifying than individual Dreadblades are entire families devoted to chaos. Those among them who align with the traitor Titan legions and the Dark Mechanicum are known as infernal houses, utilizing tech sorcery and summoned demonic creatures to enhance their already formidable walkers. Other knightly courtyards, known as iconoclast, are famous for far more varied associations. Some among them have joined the traitor legions of Astartes, or made pacts with the dark gods, while others have forsaken the Imperium to erect their own kingdoms. The history of Chaos Knights begins in the distant and forgotten past of humanity. Long before the Emperor ascended on Terra and founded the Imperium, the knights built their strongholds on planets across the galaxy. Though they survived battles with countless horrors and stood firm through long millennia, even such noble individuals proved vulnerable to the taint of the warp. The first knightly houses emerged soon after humanity began to conquer the stars. On the ships of the Long March series, colonists departed from Terra, travelling for decades or even centuries through the cold void to their designated destinations. Countless souls fell victim to warp cataclysms and navigational errors, and many who reached new worlds encountered exceptionally harsh conditions. Some of these planets were scorched by incessant volcanic eruptions or fierce electrical storms. Other worlds were bathed in strange radiation or teemed with carnivorous predators or bizarre pathogenic organisms that exterminated the unexpected guests. Often, colonists faced fierce resistance from local sentient species, leading to bloody wars for dominance. However, the most resilient of humanity not only survived but thrived in these new environments. With the help of technology and standard template constructs, pioneers created the structures and machines necessary to colonize planets. Each of these constructs could reproduce specific items with exact precision, allowing colonists to build massive residential buildings capable of protecting them from the elements and commission facilities to provide essential necessities like food, water, and breathable air. Often, people converted spacecraft into outposts, which later became mighty fortresses. This enabled the manufacture of heavy mining equipment and the establishment of purification plants and enrichment factories to quickly begin extracting the natural resources of new worlds. STC were also used to construct formidable war machines capable of annihilating hostile aliens or repelling their invasions into the growing domains. The mechanical suits of the first knights served as both tools of labor and war. They could be used to fell gigantic trees and endure aggressive environments, as well as to shoot xenos. Of course, only the most skilled and determined individuals could operate such apparatuses, and it was to them that other colonists turned for protection and then leadership. Subsequently, long lineages of pilots emerged, gradually becoming more stringent and authoritative due to the mental programming of the systems. Thus, the aristocrats of the first knightly families arose. The planets they ruled gradually became isolated, forsaking scientific advances in favor of traditions established and upheld by the noble houses. As a result of such isolationism, the night worlds diverged from the path taken by the rest of humanity, and this saved them from the impending nightmares. Humanity quickly spread among the stars, but even more quickly it became fragmented. The vast distances between colonized worlds led to the emergence of entirely different cultures, as well as rapid genetic evolution and mutations. Humans were born with the ability to sense the turbulent currents of the warp, existing parallel to real space, and even to direct them. Some civilizations ruthlessly persecuted psychers and exterminated them, while others revered them and allowed them to rule. In addition to psychers, other subspecies of humanity appeared, the so-called abhumans, whose gene pool became irreversibly damaged by the natural environment. Interstellar wars erupted everywhere when different ideologies of neighboring systems clashed. It was then that intelligent machines rebelled against their masters, and entire planets were overrun by alien invaders. Worlds were submerged in flames, which extinguished many wonders of the age of technology. And following the anarchy began the warp storms that tore the void apart. The lines of communication between the multifaceted domains of humanity were disrupted, and inhabited regions were cut off from each other. Now their inhabitants were left to face any calamity alone, However, this period of darkness and terror was weathered better by the night worlds than others. Aristocrats promptly executed subjects afflicted by mutations and even severed those branches of their family tree where genetic deviations appeared. They initially rejected the use of sentient machines, believing that their hard labor and self-sacrifice would be sufficient to fortify their native worlds, and this largely spared them from the rampage of the Iron Men. Clad in knightly armor, warriors expelled invading Xenos from their domains and dealt with the hordes of mutants flooding from nearby planets. Thus, the nobles fortified their citadels, stood guard over the planet, and survived in a galaxy consumed by discord. Over long centuries, the society of the night worlds degraded even further, leading to superstitions regarding enemies encountered during the long night being immortalized in the codes of honor of the noble class. Technologies that once enabled colonists to survive became obsolete, and the understanding of their principles faded long ago. However, the knights themselves remained, as did their traditions and the people they swore to protect. When the Great Crusade began, many night houses reunited with humanity. Armadas of ships departed from Terra to seek out the scattered survivors among the stars and unite them under the aegis of the Emperor. The discovered planets suffered under the yoke of egocentric rulers, dictators, and despots who had seized power during the anarchy of the Age of Strife, and they refused to bow before the Lord of Humanity. However, the armies of the expanding Imperium were swiftly crushing such regimes. The first report of re-establishing contact with a night world was sent by a rogue trader named Jeffers. He reported to the Adeptus Administratum about the immense power of the night suits and the loyalty and resolute spirit of the nobles who piloted them. In the following years, the armies of the Imperium found hundreds of other similar planets and returned them to the fold of humanity. Many noble families eagerly swore allegiance to the leaders of the Great Crusade, seeing the opportunity to cultivate their values such as duty and order throughout the galaxy. Of all those participating in the galactic conquest, the Adeptus Mechanicus organization found it easier to secure the allegiance of the knightly families. The tech priests were eager to acquire the archaeotech remaining in the aristocrats' worlds, as well as to exploit the vast mineral wealth. Many barons and dukes pledged to serve the Mechanicus, while others swore directly to Terra and the Emperor. But regardless of their oaths, all knights invariably answered any call to war. In gratitude, the tech priests of Mars inducted the night houses into the mysteries of the Omnissiah, and they discovered many forgotten secrets that allowed them to better serve their masters. The Great Crusade united planets across the galaxy under the banners of the Emperor, but at the zenith of its power, the Imperium fell victim to treacherous betrayal. War Master Horus and nearly half of the Space Marine legions succumbed to the corruption of the Dark Gods, and, in the name of chaos, unleashed an apocalyptic war against the rightful ruler. Civil war divided society. The Legiones Astartes exterminated their recent allies, while countless hordes of heretics burned worlds, and the light of hope, kindled by the Emperor, dissolved into pitch darkness. It was then that the first of the night houses switched sides to chaos. Many in the Imperium believed that knighthood was incorruptible, partly due to the connection with the throne's mechanicum, which altered the aristocrats' minds, preventing even the thought of betrayal and treachery. Most noble houses, indeed, fiercely fought against the heretics, purging the few rebellious souls from their ranks and unwaveringly supporting the loyal Space Marine legions. With their might and absolute loyalty, They became the bedrock of the Imperium in countless bloody battles, but that same loyalty compelled many to join the enemy. Countless forge worlds of the Mechanicus defected to Horus's side, along with the night houses that had sworn to the tech priests. The Dark Mechanicum delved deeper into the abyss of blasphemous tech sorcery, and the corruption of chaos inexorably seeped into the warriors who served them. Marked with forbidden runes, the knights went to war alongside the traitor Titan legions, slaying the defenders of the Imperium. Other fallen families dared not break the oaths given to the Legions Astartes, even though they turned out to be traitors. The noble warriors of these houses adhered strictly to the code of honor, serving without question and responding to any call to war, and thus stepped onto the path of damnation. Yet there were those knights who turned against their brethren, renouncing familial bonds of their own accord. Some heeded the whispers of ruinous entities in their dreams, while others were subjugated to the will of dark gods through sorcerous rituals. Thus emerged the Chaos Knights, who would sow death and terror among the stars for 100 centuries. Each loyal knight embodies a long history of honor and self-sacrifice, but the genealogy of the Chaos Knights tells only of horror and the abyss of vice. It was only through unthinkable villainies and ruinous rituals that knightly families were seduced, but following their fall, their victims numbered countless. The union of an aristocrat with the throne mechanicum is a burdensome and agonizing affair. Only the most capable men and women, endowed with impressive physical, mental, and spiritual strength, can endure this process and are forever changed after undergoing the rite of becoming. Within each knightly family's stronghold lies a sacred place known as the Room of Echoes. There, an aspiring pilot is connected to the throne mechanicum and left alone for the trial. In each throne reside the spectral echoes of its past owners, and it is they who assess whether the candidate is worthy. Penetrating through neural connections directly into the mind, they can reach into hidden thoughts and uncover the most carefully guarded secrets. The rite continues for long, harrowing hours and can stretch into eternity for those who fail the test. Those accepted by the throne mechanicum gain an eternal bond with it, as well as with the spirits of the ancestors within. The rite of becoming is not only a means of transforming an aristocrat into a pilot, but also a necessary safeguard against corruption. The throne acts as a shield that prevents the knight's power from falling into malevolent hands. From the moment it recognizes a new owner, it influences them even when they are not clad in armor. Concepts of loyalty and long-standing hierarchy are etched into the mind, along with a deep and undivided respect for forebears and family traditions. At first glance, such encoding makes betrayal impossible. However, the will of the dark gods is strong, and their corruption can indeed penetrate everywhere. By the time of the Horus heresy, pilots of the first iconoclast families had already undergone the becoming, and the monstrous schism of the Imperium became a terrible shock for the nobles who were vassal-dependent on traitors. When the civil war engulfed the galaxy, ghosts in hundreds of thrones mechanicum wailed in grief, tormented by the impossibility of following their oaths and maintaining honor in the light of the treacherous deeds of those to whom they swore fealty. Their neural screams were so intense that they drove some aristocrats mad, while others experienced dreadful cerebral hemorrhages. Yet the overwhelming majority of noble protectors suffered from unending torment. Their conscience and anger were relentless, and every negative emotion was only amplified and echoed by the ancestral spirits within the thrones. According to the chivalric order, failing to fulfill one's duty is considered a transgression that can only be redeemed through selfless service. Therefore, such knights fought for their treacherous lords with even greater fury. By the command of the rebellion's leaders, the lances of the Chaos Knights pierced the armies of the Imperium. Once noble aristocrats led invasions that devastated cities and enslaved the populations of entire planets. The constant bombardment by the knights toppled the kilometre-high statues of the Emperor, which were then replaced with pagan monuments glorifying the cruelty of the dark gods. Yet the attempts to drown their self-hatred in unyielding servitude only added fuel to the fire. This drove the knights to new acts of violence, pushing them to dive deeper into the abyss of vice, and with each base action, the ghosts trapped in the thrones screamed ever louder. Over time, the Chaos Knights changed so drastically that no one could recognize the valiant warriors they once were. Some transformed into incarnations of slaughter, cutting their way through steel and flesh, wishing to drown their unimaginable despair in oceans of blood. Others became so capricious that their loyalty and motives shifted with the emotions gripping their souls. The madness rooted in every chaos knight eroded their sense of proper conduct, distorting familiar values. Such fallen individuals justified their gruesome atrocities, convincing themselves that every decision they made must be right, as they were raised as paragons of virtue. As they incinerated yet more imperial defenders, the knights believed such measures were necessary, for otherwise the code of honor would not permit them to burn people alive. According to such perverted logic, if tearing 100 imperial soldiers to pieces is considered a feat, then there is no greater honor than plunging the galaxy into the flames of war. The inner torment of the Chaos Knights forever tainted their thrones. After death, the digitized spirit of the fallen aristocrat remained within, where their twisted notions of nobility spread among other ghosts like an infection. Now the thrones no longer protected the pilots from corruption, but rather fueled the malignant tendencies of those connected to them. Bloodlust, sadism, and psychopathy took root in the lineages descending from these first Chaos Knights, giving rise to the militant tyrants of the early iconoclastic families. However, not all knights succumbed to chaos in the same way as the iconoclasts. Nobles devoted to the heretics among the Dark Mechanicum underwent countless horrific rituals designed to corrupt the seemingly incorruptible throne technologies within the colossal machines. Even the eldest of the Mechanicus lacked a true understanding of such devices, but the incredible military potential of the knights drove them to increasingly mad experiments. In the hellish forge worlds, dark tech priests forged their own sinister and wailing dungeons, where they transported thrones from captured knightly armours, often with the mutilated yet living owner still inside. Along the walls of many such chambers were occult devices, concentrating warp energy streams onto the thrones. In other instances, the chambers were filled with mechanical tentacles that burrowed into the thrones like parasites, allowing diabolical entities to penetrate the bodies and minds of the connected pilots. Some members of the Dark Mechanicum sect even cultivated savage warriors who fought for the right to undergo the rite of initiation. None were trained in the traditions of the knightly houses, yet the opportunity to control a colossal machine blinded them, compelling them to take risks. Naturally, such experiments universally resulted in nightmarish outcomes. However, apart from the agonizing screams, explosions of flesh, and the trash code-laden howls of tainted thrones, the Dark Mechanicum nevertheless achieved progress. To combat the spirits dwelling within, The tech priests developed secret procedures, such as summoning spectrophage demons to devour the echoes of past owners or contaminating with malicious code. In rare instances, tech priests even opened tiny warp rifts within ancient microchip blocks. Of course, only a handful of knightly armors and thrones survived such sophisticated experiments, but those that did were forever tainted, along with the unfortunate pilots who survived. Through unimaginable operations, the Dark Mechanicum bonded fallen aristocrats with their cursed war machines, creating the progenitors of the first infernal houses. As the taint deeper invaded the knights' souls, their holdings too transformed into a bitter mockery of former grandeur. Previously, the inhabitants of these planets looked to the knightly order for protection and guidance, but now their entire existence became filled with terror. Altered beyond recognition by the warp's influence, the nobles hunted entire city populations for sport, paying their overlords tribute in the form of slaves, destined for agonizing death during sadistic rituals, or while forging pacts with demons. Once, future night pilots prepared for years to fulfill their duty and showcase their skills in ceremonial duels. Now they competed with each other in the extermination of their subjects. Corruption took root at all levels of society on such planets. Numerous cults openly worshipped the dark gods. Fallen aristocrats vied with each other, erecting grand altars in honor of destructive forces, and the bodies of defeated foes were piled into massive charnel pits. Worlds that once seemed bastions of order in an age of discord transformed into sources of anarchy, from which emanated the all-encompassing contagion of chaos. Over the millennia that followed Horus's heresy, ever more knights fell victim to corruption. The energy flows of the warp, emanating from storms, inexorably altered nearby night worlds, and more than once they disappeared in the area of ghastly maelstroms, only to reappear, revealing that the population had been consumed by demons and the war machines had been monstrously altered. Some knights were slowly corrupted during prolonged campaigns on the side of the Imperium. After centuries of exterminating countless hordes of frenzied heretics, the pilots began to believe their calling was destruction in essence. Such thoughts frequently took hold of the nobles who fought far from their kin or on battlefields where the dreadful influence of chaos warped reality. Covered in dried blood from thousands of battles and seeing only horrors surrounding them, the knights could no longer distinguish allies from enemies. The urge to kill overshadowed even their fleeting sanity, and the spirits no longer cared upon whom their wrath descended. There have been instances where warriors, considered dead, were actually driven mad, and it later turned out they continued the slaughter incessantly. Chaos distorts not only the souls of pilots, but also the knightly armors themselves. The essence of the warp flows through the weapon systems and ancient circuitry of formidable war machines, while their tormented machine spirits howl like wounded beasts. Over time, even the armor plates and numerous weapons transform beyond recognition. The corruption that infiltrated the throne mechanicum spreads through all systems like rot. The machine spirits, controlling the powerful driving mechanisms, obey the pilot's insane will and the phantom inhabitants of the throne. Therefore, the knight no longer strides with a firm, confident gait, trained through generations of upbringing and education in noble families. Instead, the walker leaps like a hungry predator, eager to taste the flesh of its prey. The urgent desire to protect allies, to become an indomitable bastion in the defense line or an unstoppable spearhead of assault, has disappeared. The machine spirit of the Chaos Knight cares nothing for those it fights alongside. It is indifferent to whether they survive or perish. For all that matters is the continuation of the carnage. Before the approaching desecrator-type knights spread waves of terror and despair, for each earth-shaking step heralds impending doom. These hellish machines hunt their prey with a chilling zeal born of malice, sparing no one, whether formidable foe or weak enemy. Mercilessly and methodically, they crush strongholds, level all shelters to the ground, and pursue retreating adversaries, wishing to annihilate every last one. The Chaos Knights, classified as desecrators, wield an intimidating arsenal of close and mid-range weaponry, and utilize them both in duels with enemy machines and monstrous beasts, as well as in sieges of fortresses. Typically, a Thunderstrike gauntlet is mounted on one limb, capable of crushing, squeezing and tearing apart pathetic mortals, or even lifting a wrecked tank hull to hurl into enemy ranks. Another primary weapon of the Desecrator is the Laser Destructor, capable of inflicting severe damage, and it possesses a considerable blast radius for a focused emitter. Each shot is heralded by a growing wail as energy flickers near the muzzle, and then a discharge emerges with a crack reminiscent of a mountain splitting. Wherever the actinic orb strikes, armor and flesh are vaporized in an instant. The charge from the Laser Destructor can create a 30-centimeter hole in a solid adamantium plate from a distance of 900 meters, and the intermittent surges of excess energy accompanying the beam can tear apart even the most well-protected chain. The aristocrats piloting Desecrator-type knights are ruthless despots, often holding the metaphorical leashes of the warhounds serving the house. Through connection with mechanicum helms, which bind the pilots to distorted thrones, the Dark Barons coordinate flank attacks and direct enfiladed fire to flush enemies from their hiding spots with the hands of their servitors. As a result, even the best entrenched opponent faces an unpalatable choice: die under the heavy steps of a Knight Desecrator or from the hail of its rattling guns. Ultimately, no one is permitted to survive the wrath of the Knights of Chaos. Only death remains in their wake. With a frenzied metallic roar, the frenzied knights charge into battle, running full tilt at the enemy, disregarding safety and straining the servo motors to such an extent that the reactor readings go off the scale, and alarms wail, warning of the imminent danger of falling. Piloting these mad machines is akin to tying one's mind and soul to a blazing meteor, and the only task left for the pilot is to strive to best direct the fury of their knightly armor. Such a life quickly exhausts many nobles, driving them to madness as they themselves turn into rabid beasts. Knights of the Rampager type are incredibly vicious beings, so unruly and unrestrained that they are often simply dropped from low-flying macro haulers directly into the thick of battle. It also happens that they're teleported in adamantium-enchanted cages from warships in orbit or delivered to the front, shackled in ultra-heavy transport restraints akin to a straitjacket. However, despite all precautions, the frenzied walkers have repeatedly broken free on the way to combat zones, eager to quench their thirst for battle at the expense of recent allies. Yet anyone who has witnessed a Rampager crashing into enemy lines firsthand understands why the fallen houses still use them, despite the associated risk. The massive knights fight akin to enraged demons rather than machines, their armor distorting and bending, upper limbs twisting at seemingly impossible angles due to structural constraints. With the screech of adamantium chains and overloaded servo systems, these monstrosities crash through everything in their path with armoured gauntlets and slice foes apart with Reaper-pattern chains words. Striking both astoundingly, quickly and ferociously, they break through the blocks set by even the most experienced pilots, drive the helms and crest of Imperial Knights into their hulls, and tear off the heads of the elegant Eldar Wraith Knights. With chopping or thrusting lunges made by their roaring chain reapers, the rampagers sever the limbs of the tyrannid bio-horrors, then gleefully disembowel them. Meanwhile, the rampagers pay no heed to the retaliatory fire as they fall into a berserk state. Of course, they deploy their ion shields and adjust their angle, but this is more a desperate attempt by the fallen aristocrats to offer themselves some semblance of safety while allowing their mounts to demolish anything in their path. The rampagers suffer catastrophic losses as they find themselves at the forefront of every attack, fighting with unending ferocity until they are so damaged that they can no longer take a step. Thus, it is a rare occasion for such a war machine to voluntarily leave the theatre of operations, and this circumstance is considered by many fallen houses, for it is far simpler to extract the broken armour from the battlefield and repair it than to attempt to capture a rampaging beast. The Death Spoiler embodies everything it means to be a Chaos Knight. The fallen nobility who pilot them vehemently reject honour and valour in any form. The searing hatred that fills them stems from their long bond with the corrupted throne's mechanicum, alongside the gradual deterioration of their mental health over decades of bloody wars and unending crusades. Each has their own long history recounting horror and brutality, dictated by selfish despotism and a thirst for personal power at any cost. At first glance, all despoilers, except for those most disfigured by mutations, resemble the Imperial Knights they once were. However, their weaponry differs greatly. They have renounced the traditional weaponry configurations used by loyal houses for millennia, instead equipping themselves with whatever the pilot desires or can salvage from the wreckage of other war machines. Preferences vary significantly both between different fallen families and among individual dreadblades. For instance, House Mycorphas venerates the Lord of Decay, which leads their Knight Despoilers to be slowly consumed by living rust, causing more complex weaponry to eventually fail. Consequently, they primarily rely on Gatling cannons and patina-covered battle cannons, as well as plague-ridden missile pods known as Thunderstrike gauntlets. House Thryn, on the other hand, hails from worlds governed solely by the rule of the blade, leading every Knight Despoiler, serving them to wield a Reaper Chainsword. Knight Tyrants, so immense they tower over even other Chaos Knights. They are akin to walking bastions of wickedness, armed with the most formidable weapon systems available to a fallen house. When a Knight Tyrant goes into battle, it revels in wielding its full destructive arsenal. Often, they deliberately expose themselves to retaliatory fire and stride contemptuously through volleys of the enemy's most potent weaponry to secure the perfect position. Due to their close bond with the cursed spirits of the machine they pilot, the fallen aristocrats are particularly prone to pride and delusions of invulnerability. For the same reason, almost all of them eventually merge with their walker, either driven by a maniacal desire to become the largest and most devastating warrior, or simply because they become subjects to the will of the metallic monster. The Knight Tyrants boast a rich selection of long-range weaponry. With volcano lances and ectoplasma decimators, they deal with even the largest and most distant armoured targets, while missiles imbued with demonic energy fly through the warp to strike the enemy at its very heart. In close proximity, Knight Tyrants unleash their conflagration cannons, spewing malevolent warp flame or dispersing plague-infected acids. The hull-mounted siege breaker cannons can pin and wear down the enemy with continuous fire, while the thundercoil harpoons are designed to destroy the most formidable machines, biomonsters, and fortifications. A devastating piercing strike followed by a macro-voltage electric charge and a rending recoil of the harpoon, a maneuver as dirty as it is effective. Hence, Knight Tyrants are true heavyweights among the fallen families, regardless of whether they stand immobile, holding positions, or advance unrelentingly. Charging forward on mighty mechanical limbs, war dogs approach the enemy like predators. With each step, the rasping whistle of their engines grows louder, and the tremor from their stride becomes increasingly distinct. Once the prey is within reach, the war dogs open fire. A hail of solid projectiles mows down infantry ranks, while scorching thermal streams vaporize flesh and leave armored vehicles as nothing but blazing wreckage. The boldest walkers then rush towards their disoriented foes and slaughter the survivors with brutal sweeps of their chain talons. Like squires in the loyal imperial knightly houses, war dogs are piloted by warriors from the lower noble classes. Their purpose is to be obedient, execute any order, fight, and die at their master's will. Before embracing chaos, they were renowned for proudly performing all commands, dutifully adhering to the principles of humility and submission instilled from birth. But now, tainted by the warp's corruption, a thirst for glory gnaws at the squires. Along with it came a deep hatred for the higher echelons of their own kind, those who hold power over them. Yet, despite their searing indignation, the helms of the Mechanicum still compel the hounds to obediently serve their masters, suppressing their overwhelming passions and desires with commanding imperatives. However, from these same helms, rich in the essence of the immaterium, emanates a constant stream of whispers and delirium which glorifies the unparalleled power of the pilot and censures the humble position he occupies in the hierarchy. All this serves as fertile ground for thoughts of usurpation and dreams of limitless power that they will attain if they overthrow the rulers. It is this unattainable dream of freedom that fuels the madness of the war dogs and fills them with fury. Managing the lesser knights does not require communion with the throne's Mechanicum. Instead, a device known as the Helm of Mechanicum is employed to transmit the pilot's synoptic commands to the servos. Additionally, it subjugates the owner, binding his conscious and subconscious thoughts to the mind of the overlord. Thus, the master can at any moment replace the pilot's personal desires with his own. This technology is what transforms the lesser knights into utterly loyal squires. As with the throne's Mechanicum, only the most formidable warriors can bond with the helm. However, it lacks many of the tech sorcerer's protections against corruption, making the lesser knights much more prone to succumbing to chaos than their lords. Warriors showing signs of depraved deviation are typically hunted down and slain by their kin. Should a fallen aristocrat survive the destruction of the machine, he is dragged from the wreckage and burnt, impaled, drowned, or quartered, after which any mention of treason is stricken from the family's history. Yet there have been instances where the corruption of several helms Mechanicum led to the downfall of an entire knightly house. The connection that allows overlords to command their squires became a conduit for warp's taint, turning barons and baronesses, high kings and queens into mad barbarians. Articulations that were ritually oiled for centuries now spark and creak with movement. The plasma reactor growls gutturally, shifting into overdrive, to allow the night to unleash all its wrath. Geysers of shimmering flame burst from the exhausts, distorting the very air above the immense armoured hull. In advancing, the walkers angle their ion shields forward to deflect desperate fire. And then deliberate strategy and meticulous target selection give way to a sharp thirst for sowing indiscriminate devastation. Torment all who are too weak to resist, and in the name of personal glory, wrest the most magnificent trophy from the enemy. If the mechanical armour of loyalist knights can be likened to a faithful steed, then the war machines of their fallen counterparts are akin to rabid hounds, with which one must eternally struggle to ensure compliance with orders. To anyone who gazes upon a Chaos Knight, it becomes immediately clear that if these monstrous creations ever possessed a drop of nobility, it has been consumed in the maelstrom of madness and fury. Many organizations within the Imperium stubbornly deny the mere possibility of the existence of a Chaos Knight, and doctrinal conflicts have frequently arisen within the Forge Worlds due to disagreements on this issue among the tech priests. However, the Ordo Hereticus cannot afford such self-deception, and thus writes grimoires, in which these war walkers are declared Questa Traitoris, and subsequently receive a new designation. Part of this is necessary because the fallen aristocrats soon abandon the age-old principles adhered to by the loyalist houses in selecting weaponry, equipping their knights according to their favoured methods of killing. Chaos-tainted squires are known as war dogs. They are the smallest walkers in the arsenal of the fallen houses, yet the most prone to senseless brutality. They prowl in search of unprotected flanks and isolated enemies, launching swift raids to suppress any resistance. The longer the corruption takes root within a knight, the more pronounced its deformation becomes. Internal mechanisms burst from the armour, twisting into rows of jagged spikes. Teeth grow around the weapon barrels, and the fingers of armoured fists elongate, resembling sinister claws. In extreme cases, the entire structure of these gigantic machines changes. New joints form, legs bend backward, and the vox grill splits open, transforming into a snarling maw. Such grotesquely distorted fusions of metal and flesh are classified as rampagers. These hellish creations rush into the heart of battle, annihilating everything in their path with a hail of fire and frenzied swings of melee weapons. Knight rampagers are so externally and internally deformed that some inquisitors of the Ordo Hereticus speculate they might be based on corrupted Dark Mechanicum STC constructs. However, as grotesque as the appearances of the fallen knights may be, their command chambers are even more horrifying. Many aristocrats become fused with their thrones, their flesh merging with the mechanisms, and control tendrils akin to tentacles penetrate nerve clusters like parasites. As the mechanical suit absorbs more warp energy, its owner transforms into a creation of pure chaos. Some are entirely consumed by their thrones, their bodies splitting open like a rotting carcass, forming a cage of splayed ribs and exposed organs within which the next pilot might sit. Over the course of several generations, such thrones take on the appearance of a rose with fleshy petals possessing a vague consciousness. Other pilots, however, transform into abominations right within their armour. Mutated into amorphous creatures of muscle and bone, they convulse in a state of absolute madness. Nevertheless, a fragment of their minds remains within the throne, allowing them to still control the knightly suit and experience the true horror of their existence. To ensure the integrity of the knightly armour in countless wars, the fallen nobility relies on artisans known as idolaters. They are a dark reflection of those loyal to the Imperium's cause. Whereas loyal brethren are trained by the Adeptus Mechanicus, dedicating them to the mysteries of the Omnissiah to serve the noble houses of knights. The idolaters learn their craft in the wailing soul forges of the Dark Mechanicum. In diabolical rituals, they forge pacts with beings that dwell in the depths of the warp, sacrificing the living and fearsome machines on great cog-shaped altars. Through such practices, they gain knowledge of the Knight's systems and, more importantly, how to desecrate the thrones of the Mechanicum that stubbornly resist corruption. It's not uncommon for realms serving as the abode of fallen nobles to host several cabals of idolaters, whose power swells and wanes depending on the services they provide to the nobility. Some are privy to the secrets of awakening rituals that can significantly enhance the already formidable war machines. Others have mastered the ability to subjugate their lord's rivals through the imposition of psychic shackles and spiritual binds. There are even idolaters who have mastered the sorcerous arts, allowing them glimpses into the warp's future, so that a tyrannical despot might best plan the next campaign of terror. The knights merely encourage rivalry among the cabals, and wars often erupt between them. Should they fall out of favour with their lords, their flayed bodies become exquisite adornments for armour. However, such actions are not undertaken lightly, for inciting the wrath of the dark arts experts means consigning oneself to a nightmarish demise. Many aristocrats who have slain idolaters were devoured by their own machines, and there are known incidents where warp energy surges within the Mechanicum throne tore their souls asunder. Therefore, the most cunning barons always ensure their sorcerers have a target upon which their wrath might be unleashed, should the need arise.